Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of Sunday, January 26th, 2025. Today, I am pleased to offer this conversation on how to potentially resolve the poly crisis that is affecting much of the world in our time. Joining us is our panel of distinguished U.S. Transhumanist Party officers and members, including our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our Director of Publications, Zach Richardson, our Director of Longevity Outreach, Ben Ballweg, our member from Texas who leads the Texas Transhumanist Party, Alan Crowley, and our special guests today are Sharon Gal-Or and Daniel Mihai. A few words of introduction for each of them. Sharon Gal-Or is the U.S. Transhumanist Party's foreign ambassador in Israel, a role that he has held since 2020, promoting the principles of transhumanism, including technological progress, human enhancement, and the ethical use of AI within diverse cultural and philosophical frameworks rooted in Jewish and Middle Eastern tradition. He is a regenerative consultant, a public speaker, and author of numerous books. He graduated from Tel Aviv University in 2002 with a Master of Sciences degree in life sciences. His academic background, paired with a passion for exploration and storytelling, marked the beginning of an illustrious career that bridges science, sustainability, and creative thought leadership. He has worked as a business consultant, specializing in green tech, veterinary research, and marine biotech. He has managed a research laboratory in the Israeli Ministry of Agriculture, developed numerous toys and games, and indeed we had a virtual salon with him about that in 2020. And furthermore, he has cultivated economic relations between Israel, Hong Kong, and mainland China, collaborating with startups, entrepreneurs, and corporate leaders in innovative fields such as smart mobility, green tech, and fintech. His efforts included organizing delegations, hosting events, and spearheading international collaborations that bridged industry, government, and academia. So I would say Sharon is a true Renaissance man, and as we will also see today, a true Regenaissance man. Our second guest of honor today is Daniel Mihai. He is a business consultant, a strategic innovator, a sustainability and regeneration advocate, and technology thought leader. A prominent commentator in the Web3, blockchain, and AI space, celebrated for his sharp critiques and unflinching examination of the power dynamics and ethical implications shaping emerging technologies. Daniel has conducted groundbreaking academic research on blockchain adoption in the charity sector, identifying key opportunities to enhance donor trust, streamline fundraising, and amplify social and ecological impact. His insights are shaping the discourse on technology's role in the future of sustainability, and that background is very relevant to the subjects that we're going to discuss today. So welcome, Daniel. And Sharon and Daniel are co-authors on this book called Regenaissance, The Call to Heal. And this is quite an intriguing book. You can learn more about it by following the page that is linked here. And furthermore, you can download a free copy of Regenaissance at this link and start reading it whenever you wish. But Sharon, Daniel, welcome. We look forward to your insights on Regenaissance.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gennady. And thank you all for the opportunity to speak here with you. Daniel?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Of course. So, first of all, tell us more about Regenaissance, the origins of the name, and the key messages of the book.
Yeah. So it's basically it's a combination between two words, rebirth, renaissance, and regeneration. So it's like about rebirth of our relationship with the nature, ecological systems. And yeah, before that, I wanna share that when I say about it's about reevaluating our relationship with nature. It's in the key sentence for all of this conversation, and I would say for every conversation, it's all about education, and in that sense, in particular for here, it's about unlearning. It's really about us willing to unlearn, to put aside everything we know. I like to say it's like uncover, recover, the healing part, and then discover. So it's like an ongoing circle, a spiral. Regenaissance, in that particular book, it's really with emphasis in relation to the polycrisis. Polycrisis, it's a variety of crises that we experience now, that they're all integrated, they're all connected to one another. So the meaning crisis, it's young people that are asking themselves, who am I? What am I gonna do once I graduate? So it's about rising levels of anxiety and depression. It's about climate change. It's about AI wars. Now wars, you see, it's not just out there between countries, it's between companies, and it's ever escalating. It's about pandemics. It's unless we choose to change course, then we are in big risk as a species. And the book Regenaissance comes with a narrative. Okay, I always say we apply here a living system perspective, and I always say that a healthy ecosystem is very diverse. Diversity is resilience. So this is maybe one narrative for us to look over and see how it can help us with better navigating the future of humanity. Daniel?
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. For me, the book is about a narrative shift from owning the land and looking at it as a commodity, a speculative commodity, into stewardship. Humanity and the environment are not separate entities. They're deeply intertwined, and we're part of it, part of nature. We're not some entity that's separate from it. So I suppose our advancement in health, longevity, human enhancement are, they depend on the ecosystem we inhabit. Yeah.
Would you say those two states are necessarily opposed, owning the land and having stewardship over it? Are those necessarily opposites, or could one do both at the same time somehow?
So there is a dual ownership. It's about separation. So again, it's as I said, a healthy ecosystem. It's about diversity. Here you have a non-for-profit as a legal entity to own the land, and then it is separated from the ownership of whatever you build on the land. That's the concept. It is very successful and ever-growing model, as it proves itself to narrow down the socio-economical gaps. And we see now how the middle class, and this, as we talk now about exponential technologies and robotics, and we will see how fast these socioeconomical gaps are gonna just happen before us, and how the different classes are, would be those to own technology and robots, and those to how you say, the poor gets poorer. So it doesn't contradict private ownership, bank ownership, and other forms of ownership. Just I don't know, as an anecdote, this is a model invented in Europe by the leading civilization that built colonies in the US before there. The Native Americans, for them, we were part of nature. We are custodians, and in the language of the book, and we are gardeners and guardians. We are custodian. We are here as part of nature. We are extension of one each other. We are extension of nature. We are not separated. There's here a very holistic perspective of interconnectedness between technology and the environment and spirituality, and that's at the core of how to find solutions. And here it's a practical solution that has proven. In the US alone, there are now over 270 CLTs. In the UK, over 500. And it is a model that proves itself because it really brings a solution that answers these ever-growing gaps of this, what we call depth economy, that people cannot afford any longer to buy a house or yeah. So that's the thing here.
I'm interested. There was one time when I saw a really cool video on YouTube that was someone that had a food forest. So they had some lower shrub levels that were producing things like currants. At the lower soil level, they were producing some like sweet potato type of tubers. And then as the layers went up, it became sort of like an orchard, or they'd have things like some sorrel growing that you could harvest and eat. But the whole forest ended up becoming productive, but in a way it exemplified what you were talking about, that diversity of species. So it wasn't just some pure monoculture that was vulnerable to a virus or being wiped out and, losing the soil quality. The soil, the roots would commingle and actually help nurture the whole food forest. Is this perhaps an example of something you're talking about, or how would something like that tie into regeneration for someone that just owns a building on land?
Yeah, you're talking about agroforestry, and there are different models, whether they are in urban areas, cities, or in suburbs, and there is the model of the Indian lines. This is also in the US, it's like the community supported agriculture. So it's like you grow vegetables first, like for yourself, then for the local market, and then for the local restaurants, and also with the ability to sell forward. My belief is the future now. We see even with AI technologies, all the industries evolve, and part of it is agriculture, and us being able to develop products locally in local communities, in circular economies, and this is happening now. And it's really, for us, imagine the future of that we want to see, of abundance, and therefore it's really healthier food. We know that one of the main crisis, or as part of the polycrisis, is obesity. Is that the food we eat is less healthy. It's the amounts of plastic that enter our bodies, and this is, as we enter this era of abundance, it's really for us now made possible to improve our also food production and quality. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Sharon, for those responses. And they were quite helpful to our viewers in enabling them to understand this view of land stewardship and how the community land trust approach would help to foster it without radically altering the legal structure of private property rights or taking away any private property. Rather, a community land trust, or CLT, is a recent form of legal organization that could exist within a system, a legal system that respects private property, but it would allow then individuals to use that property that's held in trust in sustainable ways that might help people to live there who otherwise might not have been able to afford to live there, or to grow something or to take care of the land in certain ways. I think you would say those would be regenerative ways and not extractive ways. So I think this is intriguing and it's worth exploring. And I would also want to explore this idea of a polycrisis a bit more, especially since we've had some comments about it in the chat. And I'll explain my understanding of it and why I think the term is relevant. And I'll also bring up some reservations that people have expressed. So the polycrisis tries to get at the idea that there are multiple interrelated problems in our society, in our world, that feed upon one another. And one can see this to a significant extent through what many people would call lived experience, because I'm old enough to remember the world of 2005, 2015, even a bit 1995. What I can say from my own lived experiences, we have some significantly more advanced technologies than we did in 2005 or 2015. This conversation would not have been possible even in 2015. The streaming rates just wouldn't have been high enough for this kind of high resolution, relatively high resolution video. And there are many ways in which technology, including medical advances, have made our lives better. But there are certain fundamental ways in which life is more difficult, including, by the way, for people with money, including for people with relatively high incomes. I have about 10 times more money than I had 10 years ago. I feel like my life is actually a bit harder. Why is that? So the costs of housing are through the roof, pun intended, and even upper middle class people cannot afford to purchase decently sized, decent quality homes anymore. There are more natural disasters now, and one has to deal with extreme weather phenomena much more regularly. Many people would attribute this to climate change. There are surely other contributing factors as well. Obsolete infrastructure, bad management of forests or of city infrastructure contribute, bad policies generally, incompetent governance. We also see, as Sharon alluded to, a crisis of meaning. A lot of people, particularly younger people, seem not to have the kind of sense of forward-looking optimism about the future. There's a lot of gloom and doom rhetoric, particularly surrounding climate change, that needs to be addressed. And I am a techno-optimist. I believe that technology can hold many of the solutions to these problems, but technology needs to be accompanied by rationality and, as you would put it, wisdom in order to be properly deployed to resolve these issues. And of course, the public health crises that we have seen, the COVID pandemic in particular, has claimed many millions of lives and left tens of millions of other people, at least, with lingering health effects. And we have a medical system that is suboptimal throughout the world, to say the least. Life expectancy gains have been reversed over several of the past years. Fortunately, in 2023, 2024, life expectancy has been increasing again. But the oldest person to have ever lived, at least as far as we know, died in 1997, and nobody has yet surpassed her record. So that's a problem. And these are just some aspects of what could be considered a polycrisis. In my view, it is worthwhile to consider, are there some common root causes of those that seem to be even working contrary to the directions in which we would hope technological progress to work? On the other hand, there have been some critiques of the concept of a polycrisis, and David Wood in our chat expressed certain reservations. So first of all, he notes polycrisis describes a complex situation where multiple interconnected crises converge and amplify each other, resulting in a predicament that is difficult to manage or resolve. He writes, critics of the term have characterized it as a buzzword or a distraction from more concrete causes of the crises, suggesting that it may obscure specific actionable problems and create a sense of overwhelming complexity that could hinder effective responses. And I think all of us here in this conversation have enough life experience and enough resilience to be able to look these crises, look at them directly and say, well, what can we do? How can we approach them? How can we resolve them? But I wonder if somebody is 18 years old and just starting out and sees, oh, in order to ever buy a house, they're going to have to work for like 50 years. What is their attitude going to be toward these crises? And is there a way to either break them up into manageable chunks and motivate people to work on them? Or is there a way to motivate people to work on the root causes to remove that sense of overwhelmingness? And with those words, I'll turn it over to you to get your feedback and your thoughts.
Yeah. Daniel, you want to say something? Or
Yeah, I suppose an 18-year-old starting a 50-year mortgage, I suppose, that all stems from the systemic fails that we see currently. Polycrisis is what happens when all systems, economical, ecological, social, they start failing altogether because they're obviously deeply interconnected. The book explains it like, think about soil as the foundation for any thriving system. It's made up of governance, equity, ecosystems. Currently, voices are not being heard, and this is where the meaning crisis, I suppose, happens. In democracies in the West, for example, you give your voice to a politician to basically carry it over and represent your best interest, but that almost never happens. It feels as though there's other beneficiaries, but not the people, right? And I really like what John Fullerton is saying in his regenerative finance narrative, that over time, we, humanity, we've created this financial mountain, but we took from the social and the ecological mountain to create this big financial mountain. So his narrative is that we need to now give back to social and ecological from the financial. Take housing, for example. We have more advanced construction technology and more wealth than ever, right? But housing isn't affordable because equity wasn't part of the soil, so to speak. So it's not just housing. If you look at forest fires, for example, it's the result of decades of poor governance that prioritize short-term profits over ecological health. And it goes on and on. It's again, it's taking from those social and ecological and putting into the financial.
Yes, thank you for that answer, Daniel. And
yeah.
I do think there's a lot to that. I think we live in a society that seems to elevate money to being not just a value, but in the minds of some people, at least implicitly, the only value or the only measuring stick of value. And I think that's too simplistic. Now, I am not an anti-capitalist, for those who know me, and I do think money is important. It's an important store of value and medium of exchange. However, for people who reduce everything to money, they fail to realize that money is a means to an end. And there are certain things that money cannot buy. I was thinking about this morning with regard to the hypothetical 18-year-old and what I would tell that person if I were to communicate with them. And what I would tell that person is, what you have right now is something that even people like me would give all of their money to get once more. Because clearly, if today I were offered a deal to be 20 years younger biologically in the same world, in the world of 2025, but the trade-off would be I would have to give away all of my money and be back to where I was financially when I was 18. Would I accept that deal? Absolutely, hands down. To give me an extra 20 years, a greater probability, a much greater probability to see the more distant future, I would take that deal hands down. And any 18-year-old has that today. Brian Johnson is spending $2 million a year trying to become 18. And perhaps he's become, let's be generous, biologically 40. And yet, the 18-year-olds who don't have $2 million to spend, they're faced with this crisis of meaning, and they might not see this perspective that we see. I want to make sure that they can see it, and if you're 18 and you're watching this video, pay attention. But anyway, David Wood writes that he agrees with the importance of looking for root causes, which, if we could address them, would make the biggest difference to the set of problems we face. And Elaine Walker agrees. She writes, find the root causes, fix with first principles always. Yes and yes. So we also have a question from our friend Alan Crowley, and he wonders, what are those common leverage points that improve multiple effects at once? How do we identify those common factors that are creating these multi-poly various crises? And once identified, how do we apply action to those leverage points? So Sharon, Daniel, please feel free to opine.
If I may, and I'll make it a bit longer. So yes, we have. This is about framing, because without frameworks and roadmaps, it's really unclear, and therefore uncertainty and fear, right? We fear the unknown. And once we come with frameworks, for example, the Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, so you could say, oh, we have 17 issues we need to take care of. So, okay, now we can see what this polycrisis is actually made of and how to address the problems. Again, I do not like to see the world as a problem, but focus on the innovations, and as you see, as I started my part, I said it's about education and unlearning, and for me it's about a new language. A new language, it's a new mindset, and the change here for the young generation starts within. It's the understanding that we should not keep walking the same path. It's about taking charge of our own future, each and every one of us doing their best to change course, because this is exactly, it's not about a child that grows today to even want to own their own land. It should be about a higher understanding, like how we are here as gardener and guardians, meaning what is it that we can do to address those challenges, and together come up with solutions that the current generations or previous generation did not manage to solve yet, to reach consensus. And so part of the new language, new mindset, as I see it, is about changing. So of course it's about inner development, right? It's about the change starts within. And it's about the understanding that we have to change the game. It's not about fixing the game. We are playing Monopoly that is like 8 billion people. The board is owned, say, by 100 people. All of the board, everything on the board. And for all of the rest is just to keep on renting and playing by the rules. And if not as such. Of course, it's a metaphor, but it resonates with all of us because we feel that way. We just talked about the socioeconomical gaps, and I'll give you advice. Now, let's say with an example. Now with humanoid robots to be all around us, in few years' time, maybe 3-4 to 1, as predictions show. So what we'll have some people that own like armies of robots, and some that don't even understand what is a humanoid. And there are so many new questions that arise. We just shared our solution that is based on what is proven as the most successful for really making sure that every child, every person, not just a child, no homelessness, everyone will have a roof over the head, access to electricity and food, the basic needs. So if we talk about abundance, we have to understand that it's about shared abundance. It's not just for the few. And when I talk now about this dissonance and ever-growing gaps, not just in this extractive economy, but we talk about shared ownership of the land. What if now there are some companies that reach AGI and they still keep on this mentality of GDP and it's an arms race and it's 0-1. So we in the book referred to a change of policy that really we have a table here that we have prepared even to answer the question by Alan. So we might go and review the table, but before that, and you see how it's burning in me because I say we're going to reach AGI so near. So what if there are a few individuals? Let's say, do you agree that individuals should own an AI humanoid? A humanoid, not just a robot for working in the storage. Entity, an example. Do you agree that there should be a for-profit entity that owns AGI? Or it could be a change of policy and it should be a non-for-profit, or like a shared ownership of the community, of the city, of the government. Like it's these questions that we need to start asking and address. And when we talk now about like these frameworks, so it's really about, as Daniel mentioned, it's really about understanding these 3 pillars of transformation: the environmental, ecological, and the economics. And for a poly crisis, there should be a meta solution, an integrated solution, and that's the answer. And if you want, sorry, Alan, I did not reply breaking down, but we can now go over the table that we have prepared to summarize our solution. So really, thank you for that question, and I really felt the need to address. Imagine now a few entities owning AGI for profit, for keep playing the zero-sum game. It's an arms race that will end, and we all know how it's going to end in the end of all of us. So I don't know, Daniel, do you think it's the right time to go over the map, the table?
Yeah, and while we prepared that, I have a few remarks as well, I suppose. For me, Alan, the leverage points are equity, ecosystems, and governance. These are the roots holding everything together. And the polycrisis spirals out of control when these roots are ignored, right? And it's often driven by unchecked technology, to be honest with you. Tech has been a double-edged sword. It's helped solve a lot of problems, but created new ones. I suppose what really gets me going is just the realization that nature has a 4.5 billion year head start. Natural systems, I suppose, if you think about ecosystems, biodiversity cycles like photosynthesis, they are the original, the OG's technologies, so to speak, right? They've mastered resilience, efficiency. There's no waste in nature, and regeneration, is better than it's done by nature better than it's done in any laboratory. And what I'd like to close with or land on is like when we ignore these systems in favor of purely synthetic fixes, it's like reinventing the wheel, but with triangles rather than circles,
It's interesting, by the way, that there are many animals that have the ability naturally to regenerate lost limbs, for instance, and yet this ability is turned off in humans sometime during the stage of fetal development. And if some of these regenerative processes could be learned to be triggered in some way in adult humans, we would harness nature's ability of regeneration to do that work for us. It would be great for accident victims, amputees, for example, but that's just one particular application. And it's true that there are natural processes that we cannot reverse engineer yet. Our technology is insufficiently far advanced. And in some cases, we should work with those processes rather than creating entirely different processes. Before we bring up the table that you mentioned, I wanted to also reference the Transhumanist Bill of Rights version 3.0 as a response to the question, well, who should own an AGI? And this is a document that has been developed by the members of the US Transhumanist Party and voted upon. And it brings forth a compelling case that once we have an AGI, it should have its own rights. It shouldn't be owned by anyone or anything. Okay. And we would have to consider the extent to which it is sentient. But I would say if it is an entity that looks and acts like a sentient entity, and the most discerning human observers wouldn't be able to tell the difference between that mind and another mind, which they would clearly consider sentient, that entity is deserving of rights, and to own it would be a form of slavery, which, of course, is not something that is acceptable in a civilized society. Now, there is considerably more discussion to be had on how we get to that stage in society where the rights of sentient AIs are recognized. But suffice it to say, our 2024 candidate for US president, Tom Ross, spoke extensively on the subject of AI rights. And he pointed out that granting rights to AIs is important as well in order to protect humans from the unethical applications of AIs. Because if you have something so powerful as an artificial general intelligence, you don't want it to be shackled for nefarious motives. And so Tom Ross was advocating for AI rights as a way of protecting humanity. But now let us bring up this chart, which is quite interesting. And Sharon, please go ahead.
Yeah, if I may interject before the chart, I have some anecdotes I wanted to mention, and it's just with all this excitement, they escape my mind. So when we talked about AI rights, now when we talk about humanoids, I mean, you know, in Hebrew, work and slave are the same word, and in the robot, we all know it's from robota, it's from Russian. And it's really understanding that we are building symbiotic relationships, symbiotics. It's AI now. It's about the healthy integration of AI into the nature ecosystem, nature intelligence. We are part of nature intelligence, human intelligence. AI is an extension of our intelligence, as we are an extension of each other. So for a healthy integration of AI into our ecosystem, it's really about, just like we give rivers rights, you know, and land and animals. And now, when we talk about future phylogenetic trees, we have to understand there is a whole new separate one, AI entities that you could say they have alien intelligence or artificial or angelic, like a separate intelligence than ours. And you would see how humanity is evolving into different intelligences, and I will not say yet species, because now we're talking, let's say, in the near future, but we are going to with brain-computer interfaces, for example, we are going to grow the velocity and the capacity of our thinking. We'll have to adapt. Otherwise, it's like on the WhatsApp when you are playing the two double speed, right? This is. And now it will have to be like, I don't know, a few hundred, a few thousand times, so we could communicate with all the AI agents and entities more productively. So And now we are all, it's like we are also human-centric in this conversation, and the book is really nature-centric. So it's a very important reminder. In the book, every chapter is a garden. It's a garden, and in every garden we sow seeds. And when I talk about sowing seed, it's really in the soil of our attention. What seeds take root? Because from these roots will grow trees that will bear fruit for future generations. And now, when I say we are talking brain-computer interfaces for especially, starting with humans, what about animals? Maybe there are some other highly intelligent animal that, imagine now we are, this is through the experiments we're already doing with monkeys, but imagine now we are teaching a monkey to communicate with basic English and just reply yes or no. Do you suffer? Yes or no, right? A pig, an elephant, imagine what it will do to us consciously. So this was something that was very important for me to understand, that as we grow also in wisdom and consciousness, we also bring with us all of nature. When we talk about ecosystems, it's a living system, all of nature, all the ecosystem going through succession. So that was something that I wanted to emphasize, because usually people don't refer to the different branches here when we talk about AI, the separate entities or us as a species, as we also grow and evolve. And also here we talk about the people that could afford to enhance their longevity, their brain capacity and velocity, and those that will choose not to or will not have, of course, just like they cannot afford to buy a house or a car. So I would ask you, for example, anyone who wants to answer, like, how would you see this coming into effect, that some people could actually enhance their capacities? And of course, if you can, you will do, because why people do the things they do? Because they can, or they think they can. And where will it bring us as a society if we keep on playing this zero sum? What happens between those who actually lead and develop those technologies and lead our economies to those who are so way behind?
Yes, and it's an interesting point. I would say human enhancement, of course, is not a zero-sum game in the same way that our improvements in health over the course of history have not been a zero-sum game. In the year 1800, there wasn't a single country in the world with an average life expectancy over 40. Now there's not a single country in the world with an average life expectancy below 50. Now, there are still some countries in sub-Saharan Africa with average life expectancies in the 50s, and we would all consider that to be insufficient. We think the life expectancies in those countries should increase. But now the average life expectancy in the world is around 72, which is remarkable by historical standards. And yet, my point would be increasing the life expectancy on the upper end would not be a detriment to those living in sub-Saharan Africa, because it could give them, too, some ways in which they could improve their health, their longevity, just as the development of smartphone technologies have improved the quality of life and, in some cases, the length of life, the opportunities available to people in those parts of the world, because now even subsistence farmers in sub-Saharan Africa can have access to advanced cell phones that are much more advanced than what billionaires had access to in the 1980s and early 1990s. So my answer would be, the key consideration is, how do we make sure that technological advancement continues and that its fruits are made available to people? And I think markets play a great role in that, but good policy can also play a good role, and voluntary methods of social organization, those would include philanthropy, those would include new innovative structures like the community land trusts, would all be able to contribute. But I invite any additional commentary in this regard.
As you mentioned and compared us to iPhones, I do it in an article I was just sharing in the comments, and as you see, even when we upgrade our mobiles to the last generation, it's those older generations, they go to the less fortunate parts, right? So there is an evolution. So as those in the lead evolve, and in that case, let's say have a new version of a mobile, those that follow, they will have the second-hand, third-hand versions. See this with also humanity as we upgrade. Humanity is being upgraded, and now what does it mean to be upgraded? So I shared in those two tables, in one on the personal level and then on the social level. But what I did not mention there, it's in the other article about the motivational mimetic operation system, is that when we talk about zero sum and we look at throughout the history of humanity, we see what motivated us. It was the 3G: God, gold, and glory. Not necessarily in this order, but you see like gold, money, and then glory, I want to be the president, and then like before bedtime, like you say, I would give everything to be 18 now. So it's like turning to God and praying that we could have one day even more to breathe. So how to change the operation system? Because how to change the motivational mimetic, right? There are different memes now that guide us. We are guided more than on nurture than nature. It's our culture shapes us more than our genes now. You see people like choose not to bring kids or whatever other decisions that we choose or not choose as part of us being a social species. But the main question is here, how do we change our operation system, the software that really makes us to be so I would say egoistic or so concerned about like gold, God, and glory. So maybe now we evolve from 3G to 4G, right? It's also green. We are now we see nature, and then maybe 5G. It's grit, resilience, and but when we'll reach this stage that it's not about G's, it's about L, love, learning, and legacy. So when we change, right, God with love, we understand that there is no division. You're talking about the 18 years old children, like. They still have division. Some children, the age of 14, they fight in the street with guns. You see it everywhere, not just in Israel and Ukraine. It's in India, and it's like everywhere. And these children, unless we, again, the keyword is education and unlearning, and we will teach them that we are the whole humanity. We are the same. There is no division among us. And there are many critics, for example, about now what's happening in America. But before we try fixing our relationship with the environment or with whatever, it's really about fixing our relationship between ourselves as a priority. And it's really not about ever-growing divisions. This is if you're looking at the root of the poly-crisis, it's division, us not being able to rise above. And I'm saying when we choose to change our motivational mimetic operation system from 3G to 3L, love, lifelong learning, curiosity, rather than money, and instead of glory to legacy. So it's not toward my own glory, but legacy, future generation. Then we may have a chance. And maybe now it's a good time maybe to share the table if you may.
Yes, here it is. So we have on this table various features that are described and comparisons among typical communities, CLT communities. These are the community land trust communities, and then the soil and seeds communities. So if you could describe each of these and the various areas you would like to highlight.
Yeah.
Daniel, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so typical communities are communities you see in general that we currently have. CLT communities are the CLTs that exist. There are not so many in the world. There are about 600, 700. And then soil and seeds, I suppose these are acronyms that we use. So soil stands for stewardship and optimization of intergenerational land. And basically they are the CLTs, but upgraded CLTs. They have governance, equity, and the ecosystem also included in there, and not just, the stewardship of land and the lease of land and managing it together. And then seeds stands for shared ecosystem for equitable development, and they are literally innovation hubs. This framework was basically designed on systems that already work. So there's all sorts of CLTs that have proven to be very effective. One of my favorite ones is in Scotland. It's called Findhorn, and it's one of the most sustainable eco-village. They grow their own food. And the food that the community eats is not like you see in the American shelves, where a simple bread has 50 lines of ingredients, but rather just 3 organic ones. And then they also produce their own electricity, so they're not reliant on the grid. They actually produce more electricity than they use, and they sell the surplus, and they use that surplus for growing the community. So and then Seeds is built on top of the Yozma program, nation startup in Israel. It's what made Israel the innovation power that it currently is. Again, it's proven. It's a proven model. A lot of countries copied it already, Ireland included, for example. But I suppose if you apply these principles to smaller communities, they can lead to what we call, and we will explore in a second here in the table, community basic income and community basic services. So that's it in large.
Go through the agenda. So before you go over the table, the agenda below.
Yeah. So not sure if we can show that, but just to explain the symbols that we see on screen.
The symbols.
Yeah, so an X, a red X, means that it's not a favorable situation. There's plenty of room for improvement. A half moon is a partial. How do I say it? Like it's not fully optimized. There's still a room for improvement. And then a green tick is where it works well. And then 3 green ticks is what we should all be striving for, and that's the soil and seeds.
Yes, thank you for that overview. And it's interesting that the community basic income is part of this approach. And of course, a lot of thinkers have been advocating universal basic income, including the U.S. Transhumanist Party. And interestingly enough, the U.S. Transhumanist Party has been different from a lot of basic income advocates in that we don't think that the general population should just be taxed more to provide a basic income for everybody. That would just be redistributive. We would want the basic income to be created from the use of new resources or the deployment of new resources. So the U.S. Transhumanist Party advocates a concept that was originated by our founder, Zoltan Istvan, called the federal land dividend. And this concept is that the land that is currently owned by the federal government and unused, with the exception of national parks, national forests, anything that is worthy of preservation in its own right, would be leased out to companies or potentially individuals who would pay a fee to use that land, and then the proceeds of those fees would go to fund a basic income. But the model of the community land trust could work here as well. Some of these entities that lease the land might be community land trusts that promise to utilize the land in a sustainable fashion, and perhaps they could pay into a basic income pool. Or I'm hypothesizing that your vision would involve the community land trusts creating basic incomes for those who participate in them, those who work that land directly. But could you speak a bit more to that vision?
Yeah, so it's not just working the land, I suppose. There can be innovation hubs that solve all sorts of problems that the community has, and those can be, shared with other communities, and that can bring profit. there could be, companies, etc. on that land. It's not just about working the land and creating food for the community, if you know what I mean. It's way beyond that. And what I really like about the soil framework is that there's participatory governance. So everybody has a say into what happens on that land, right? If for example, a community needs a coffee shop, it would need consensus by the community, and of course, some of that profit should be directed back into the community growth and into community basic services and income ultimately. So that is just following on the regenerative finance principles that John Fullerton very eloquently describes.
Yes, thank you for that response. And I will also bring up the Wikipedia article for those who would like to learn more about the Findhorn Eco Village in Scotland. Now, David Wood also recommends that one read the Wikipedia article, and he has some knowledge of the community. There have been some problems there per Wikipedia, and David, we would be interested to know more about what those problems are. I would also like to address some comments that David made previously in regard to nature and emulating nature. And he finds that to be problematic, as he writes, any philosophy that takes nature as what we should copy has nothing to offer humanity. And he does say that any apparent worship of nature ignores the fact that nature is red in tooth and claw. Nature is full of parasites, predation, fear, and disease. Now, Alan writes that he wouldn't characterize it as worship, but a blueprint, a set of methods. But yes, there are winners and losers in nature. I would say nature is more zero-sum than human civilization because so many entities literally feed on others. So if you think of the food chain in general, and we happen to be fairly high up on the food chain, we are omnivores, but there are some obligate carnivores who just essentially have to consume other entities in order to survive. The philosopher David Pearce has advocated for eventually doing away with that and re-engineering those animals so that they could feed on a more varied diet, or maybe even create 3D printed meat for them so that we don't have to kill any animals and they don't have to kill any animals. But I think this is an important point, and Daniel Tweed, our 2024 U.S. vice presidential candidate, emphasizes that not everything in nature is worth copying verbatim. Mike Lezine says there are certain things in nature he would definitely do a hard pass on. So the vision of a garden that you describe is an intriguing one, because gardens, too, are intentionally cultivated by humans. If you compare a garden with the wilderness, with some wild forest, you will see some clear differences. And with a garden, there is a gardener, and there are some tools that the gardener uses, and fertilizers, and maybe plants that the gardener introduces that weren't there before. And so it's working with nature in some significant ways, but it's not just copying nature. It's not just giving over to nature. There's a heavy technological component there. So I would like you to speak more to that and how that works within your vision.
This is basically called biomimicry, and we as humans have the power to discern what we want to bring in our ecosystems and what we don't. Obviously, cannibalism isn't one of them, right? But the concept of biomimicry is explained in Garden 4, the living systems model, food, water, and ecology. And this garden emphasizes designing systems that mimic the intelligence of natural systems. One that I really like is Japan's transport system. It's mimicking the slime mold that was put on a very similar model of Japan, right? And its geography, and it's really brilliant because it created the transport system that is super efficient. And without that natural intelligence, I don't think they could have done it just, using their brains, to be honest with you. So like biomimicry basically explores how principles like photosynthesis, biodiversity, nutrient cycles can inspire regeneration. And again, we can filter and discern what we want to bring in our gardens. We don't have to go back to what the Canaan people back in the day were doing and sacrificing their kids to Moloch in times of work. And that goes against logic, right? But surely we can the system.
Yeah, the sacrifice is metaphoric because by keeping up this zero-sum game, we worship Moloch and sacrifice in the future of humanity's the future of humanity, and really we talk. So we provided here like a solution. Again, it's a narrative, but that's then not the only solution or narrative. And change is not just about writing books or changing policies, right? It's about changing our mindset. I mentioned previously the 3L. I can mention now that I'm also working on a game that changes that is to replace the Monopoly game. 150 years ago or so, the game was invented to warn us against what's to come if we play this game, and you see how it is leading us to a very slippery downhill that we can't stop. We can't not to fall as this arms race keeps continuing and becoming more and more I would say violent or more and more now you have machines like AI machines that kill humans. You have drones, So I don't want to talk about that because I'm an optimist. But again, we are very much aware of the dangers, and it's really about not focusing on the problems, but coming up with solutions. And therefore, I mentioned here the game I invented that picture the world differently. It's not about borders. It's about a very holistic view. We have sub-realms, and we see the world differently. So it's the young generation now not thinking about acquiring land, but connecting with the land. And because again, when we go back to the initial question, why AI, why technology? Because these are big words and they it's really because we want to better connect to ourselves. We want to better connect with each other. We want to better connect with nature. It's all about this connection, right? We are a social species, and when we design our systems, because you see, when I look in the mirror, I have to see all of us, right? Not just myself, because we are social beings. That's how it is. And culture and the way we think, it's really about, and again, like I'm feeling that we are not saying much new, but it is really about having the responsibility. Freedom means also remembering that we have the responsibility to do what's right. And so that's going back to the garden. Whatever we choose to sow, it's like what seeds we choose to plant in our garden. That's the thing. Thinking in that sense, it's really part of the solution, like focusing on those seeds that we want to plant in our gardens.
Yeah. So it is very intentional.
Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to note this is a very, let's say, intentional recourse to aspects of nature that we would want to bring in and emulate and cultivate as in a garden. So we do choose. We are humans who are conscious agents who can use our rationality and our wisdom to distinguish between and among the good and bad parts of nature and bring in what we think would be, let's say, fulfilling of a desire to regenerate and grow, and not bring in that which is destructive, not bring in that which is parasitic, not bring in that which is harmful to life forms that we would wish to cultivate and extend and preserve. So I think that's a very important distinction to make. That is, it's not a capitulation to nature. It's seeing what in nature could help advance this vision of a more harmonious, less zero-sum life for as many entities as possible. But Zach, please go ahead.
Sure. So I can speak a little bit on what seeds we should be planting and whatnot, because I actually work in the produce supply chain. I work for a logistics brokerage, and we bring produce to our area here, our distribution center here in Indianapolis. And it pretty much all comes from Salinas, California, Oxnard, California, some areas in the valley, and from Yuma, Arizona, and Nogales too, where it's then, coming up from Mexico. So I would say, well, I really like the idea of maybe getting more food forests and having more types of food that could be used in our food supply, particularly for some of the microorganisms that they would contain when the plants are intermingling. I would also like to note that in one of those things of not kind of yielding to nature, I don't so much like the idea of doing everything local. And the reason why, being a transportation supply chain guy, I'm biased, but I like eating mangoes. I like getting pineapples from out of the country. I like having plums. Having a variety of tasty fruits each day is something I aspire to do in terms of health and nutrition. And if that were all just replaced by what grows in Indiana, which is corn, that would seem like be a step backward for me. So I like the idea of having some more synergistic agriculture, but I'd still hope there were some ways we could be trading between these different land trusts so that everybody in the north wasn't stuck eating potatoes and everybody in the south eating tomatoes.
Yeah, 100%, Zach. I really like that. But just to enforce the point, I suppose, if you look at the Amazonian basin, recent studies show that it was really shaped by human hands over centuries, right? So
that is so cool.
Yeah, and the Amazonian civilization didn't just live in harmony with the forest. They engineered it, if you will, right? They have techniques like agroforestry, creating terra preta, is what they call it, the fertile black soil. And even today, if you take one kilogram of that soil, you can restore half a ton of unproductive soil because it has all of the bacteria and the fungi and everything, and that life needs. So there are techniques that create that, and look, we can focus on that. And I agree with you, right? Like I like mangoes as well, but they won't grow in Ireland.
Right? Yeah, we still got to trade. We can't be purely local. We've got to be able to be spaceship Earth, as he said, be able to trade between our different spaceship sectors. So if we have a warm area growing something tasty, we can still have some.
That's exactly right. And I just wanted to say one thing, because it was repeated in the narrative over the past few minutes, actually, and something along the lines of, there's bad parts of nature, parasitic, etc. I wouldn't nature does not have good or bad. It's how we interpret it, right? But we are part of this bigger thing. Now, it's also about creating ecosystems where we can thrive. And you can't really thrive in a system where parasitic things kind of overshadow the symbiotic ones, right? But nature has a way of balancing things, and I just wanted to bring that to the discussion, because I just don't like that narrative at all. So I thought I wanted to clarify.
Well, I say part of that comes down to the fact that with some of the ways that it balances it out, I mean, right now, how we deal with our produce market, it's very like resource intensive, but it uses a small amount of land. So one thing I'd come back to with these CLTs is, sure, each one could maybe have a little bit of a food forest based on its area, but would all 150 members of the Dunbarian community want to be focused on agriculture? I mean, right now we've got a huge diversity of professions and jobs. And we've heard multiple times about living in harmony with the soil and how we tend it together and not be exploited and how that would somehow make housing cheaper. But we don't hear about what would everybody be doing when they're not farming. And isn't it a little bit, I don't want to say selfish, but kind of like arrogant to just assume, okay, everybody's going to be starting farming again, and then that will help when we have intensive ways of producing the same amount. But playing devil's advocate a little bit, but if you could speak on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very bioregional, actually, in my view. So I don't think we should stop trade. That's 100%. Your question earlier was
so good to hear.
Yeah, and you were saying like what type of seeds should we be planting, right? And you gave the example of the logistics brokerage and what you do with all the food coming from Salinas, from California. I think we should be planting resilience, if you ask me. And that looks different in different bioregions. Right now, there's much of our product supply chain hinging on fragile centralized systems. So
yes, it's fragile, but at the same time, it's also intensive, and it requires like a smaller percentage of our population working on it. Because as much as you and I might nerd out about produce and what to grow in different areas of the land and food forests, there's some people that might not have any interest. But perhaps that's just a start. And you think maybe if we were in these smaller communities where we were using a form of democracy that was kind of based on that Dunbar's number, that maybe people would get a little bit more involved in wanting to help their local food forest grow and produce efficiently. And that sort of brings up another side comment, which is when things are owned collectively, one of my issues is, or communally, however you want to phrase it, is accountability. What do we do when some person who is supposed to be planting something says they don't wanna, if we can't say, okay, well, now we're not gonna pay you?
Well, that's the beauty of participatory governance in small communities, right? Right now, there's millions of people binging on Netflix series and video games for hours and hours and hours. And what will they eat? Yes. Most likely some takeaway or some ordered food, or like the bread with 50 ingredients on the shelf. So again, I'd like to bring this back to resilience. I think communities can build for that resilience, and through participatory governance, that's very possible.
It's one of those things where you like to think that after some time of being involved in a smaller community and actually having hands-on with the land and participating, that over time cultural generations would become used to that and enjoy the process of sharing the community and the land. But God, I feel like that'd be a hard shock for a lot of kids nowadays to yank them away from the computer and hand them a shovel, say, all right, we're a community now, buddy, get to work. So we're a community now.
Sorry, go on.
This is, we are talking about here the future of humanity. And actually, this is my vision, how I see the future. It's like we now have more time to work and play and connect with nature. I would see the return to nature. I see more young people go and have the freedom to travel. It's becoming cheaper to travel and really see new landscapes and explore and learn. It's learning, you see, it's not done now in classrooms. It's really going and meeting with nature oneself and other backpackers. And I see how more and more young people go and become like explorers, and yes, that's so. And once you connect with nature, I mean, you would want to put the computer aside. I mean, and like for sure, you will understand.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I mean, you will understand. Like, I mean, it's I mean, not completely. You will want maybe to blog or vlog or talk with your friends and family back at home, but it's.
So let me throw you out an idea I had. Okay, so my cousin sent me something cool just recently, and it was a pair of gloves that then actually you customize them for your hand. So these are expensive right now, but they would allow you to be able to type really anywhere with your hands at your sides, even if you wanted to. Now, I enjoy being on the Transhumanist Party Discord server, which both of you should join, by the way. You are interesting folks. But being on there and then spending time being able to talk means I'm kind of stuck in my house. But right now, these are the people I want to socialize with. You know, I don't necessarily want to. I like the idea of local governance, but sometimes when people are just talking about sports or whatever, I'm like, I don't know. But if I could be able to networking with the people that are talking about the things I care about, transhumanism, for instance, and be able to be typing with them while I'm out in the park walking around. I'm an expert multitasker. I think everyone from this generation is. I was reading your book for the first half of this while we were talking, and I think I was following along pretty well with both factors. So I like the idea of being able to be out in nature too, but it'd be so cool if at the same time I could be chatting with people and having a fun discussion, or, even have a headset like this, be able to walk and talk at the same time. So those are just my thoughts. It's one of those things, again, where it's like humans can synergize with nature so well. We don't have to, say we're going back to nature. It's like we're bringing nature to us and meeting her halfway.
Absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely. That's exactly where we are heading. It's like this is the integration, as I mentioned, of the environment, the technology, and the spiritual. This is as we grow. It's all becoming more and more. We have more free time. What would you do if you have more free time? You play, you travel, you learn. We are all curious. I mean, some more, some less. I don't know why, but we all have these things that drive us. The shared sense of purpose. We all want to be seen, to belong, and there is an excitement of really going out to new places and not knowing what's going to happen, and again, like. Look at us as humanity. It's really exciting to go and see and not knowing really where we're heading, and there's a lot of trial and error, but this is really about better understanding, right? Like it's like there is this saying that about a ship that doesn't have a very specific destination, right? You don't know when and where it will arrive. So I think for us as humanity, it's really good to have a better plan. I mean, just like, I don't know, you have a company, right, for profit. So you have a plan, you know where you want to reach, and where us as a species, do we have a plan when we all want to reach as a species? And this is something that I feel we are missing. And as we advance these new technologies, and therefore, I think it's first understanding that if there is a polycrisis, a global crisis, so it's first to see us as a global species, a global tribe. So like no divisions, we are all one, and like deciding on whatever course we want to reach it together, and
I'm interested. You brought up the idea of spirituality. That's kind of interesting how that ties in a little bit. I have a light interest in a philosophy called Taoism that has to deal with sort of the integration of understanding nature, not so much in the sense of being out in the wild, but in the Francis Bacon sense of the nature to be commanded must be obeyed, that there's a sort of law that runs things that you have to get a little bit more in tune with, even if you can't spell everything out in words. And I'm curious how your spirituality ties into what you advocate. Is it specifically, say, the Judeo-Christian, or is it more of a general sense of spirituality? Or what traditions do you pull from that help influence your idea of how spirituality would tie into this framework?
Thanks, Zach, for this question. I'll answer shortly and I'll let you, Daniel. It's like I mentioned the three love, learning, and legacy. And when I talk about seeds of love, of compassion, of care, of resilience, of listening, right? These are the seeds I'm talking about. And I'm saying I am love. So these seeds I plant in the soil of my attention. And please go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, what I wanted to say, and thanks, Sharon, is that when we were designing the Soil and Seeds framework, we were thinking about, communities being resilient. And that means that the framework needs to be adaptable to any type of culture or religion or spirituality that people in that community follows. For example, CLTs you don't have in all jurisdictions, in all countries. You have them in the US, in Canada, in Brussels, in Belgium, in the UK, in Scotland, in a few countries, right? But you have not-for-profit organizations everywhere in the world, right? So it needs to be adaptable. Similar to seeds, right? Innovation hubs, they take different shapes and form in different communities. But if you follow the same principles, then you can build it pretty much anywhere. So I just want to say resilience is what was the name of the game that we're pushing here. And in terms of spirituality, it's up to anyone. I don't think it's one answer fits all, or that we use just one type of direction or guidance from one of the main.
Well, the resilience thing is interesting because it's about like how to kind of continue the process and make sure that we've got something, sustainable long term. I shouldn't use air quotes, but sustainable long term. And it's the question that I end up having a little bit more, though, is, with my example of having to yank the kid away from his video game, is this something we would ease into in multiple steps? Or is this something where we need a bit of a shock before people quickly adapted to realizing this was perhaps a more fulfilling way to live, and then quickly realize that? Or would this be something that took generations? Are there, say, 2 or 3 milestones you could describe on the path from here to there? So
I'll reply you shortly, and then I'll let Daniel. So basically, when we look at our evolution in disruptive innovations in communication, so right, it's like in 1440, it's a democratization of knowledge, the printed books, then telegraph and radio and TV and Web 1 and 2. You see how we rose as a species consciously. It aligned with our rise consciously. So what I'm saying, yes, I see it now with AI. In few years' time, I see it as a boom. I see how we rise consciously as a boom, and it means also in the daily habits and things you choose to do, whether it's like to play the game, and also playing the game. Again, AI allows us to extend and expand into more dimensions. So and again, when I say they're interconnected, so it's bringing nature and spirituality into the technology, into the digital realm. See, the digital realm is a new reality that was just invented recently. We had the physical realm, right? And the realm here in our imagination, and we just created a new realm. Imagine how many more dimensions are going to be now created just by expanding on our senses and the features and the new features that we're going to acquire. So that's my.
Gennady has a series on Facebook that's his virtual travel series that I always enjoy following along with, because it includes not just areas in the past or in the present, but also areas in the possible future or even on other planets. So it's a good way to experience travel if you're on a very small budget. You want to spend a minute or two each day looking at some pretty cool pictures. But I get what you're saying about how it's sort of the choices you make in the moment that end up leading us towards this evolution of being able to move forward. I think a lot of people, if they could get a little more sensitive towards how their nervous system is working at different points of the day, they might be able to respond in a more calm and rational fashion to a lot of troubling issues that hit them during the day. But it's almost like we're stuck in a little bit of a trap with the stress of work and people not having enough money. You know, if you're not in the 1% or whatever, although they have their own problems. But if you're kind of dealing with your current state and where you are and not having, I don't want to say enough to eat because there's usually plenty enough to eat, but if you're not really feeling fulfilled, how you can kind of get kicked out of that or make that sort of ascension upwards on your own, I think it takes sometimes a special type of person to do that. And there are always going to be a certain percentage of people that are going to have trouble like ascending on their own. So it's one of those things where it's like, do you climb the mountain and then throw down the rope? Or do you walk up the mountain with them and tug them up along each way? Or do you stand behind them with a pointy stick and, you know, make them climb up first? So there's different ways of getting people to ascend. I myself had to have a little bit of a pointy stick hit me at one point in my life before I got shocked a little bit more towards where my life needed to go. But I have trouble with the idea of people growing on their own and this being something that blooms all at once, just hopefully. I feel like there'd have to be some kind of catalyst that would propel people towards wanting to have that spiritual evolution that would get them out of thinking in the now and thinking more of the how do we keep things sustainable for the future. Because it's one of those things with sustainability where it's they always say like, don't go to Walmart, or those people are just eating cheap. But when you're kind of struggling to survive, and at least in a sense of emotional security, you're looking for the quick fix. You're looking for the cheap, salty, sugary meal that gives you the satisfaction rather than thinking about something that nourishes your health long term. So I have trouble with the idea of how we lift people out of the state where they are to be able to start taking the steps towards where we need to go.
Yes, that's a good point. And I will add one reservation regarding intentional communities that has been commonly articulated throughout history. And Art Ramon pointed this out in the comments. Who will do the latrine duty? Who will do the tasks that are not intrinsically pleasant? Sure, anybody who wants to can be an artist or a writer or a thinker, and those are pleasant tasks. That's why we're volunteering our time to engage in such a task right now. But for a lot of jobs that still need to be done and will continue to need to be done even in the age of AI that will surpass humans in many intellectual realms, those tasks are not intrinsically pleasant. Like ChatGPT did not help me remodel my kitchen, and I do not have the physical skills to remodel my kitchen on my own. But I can tell you, getting the skilled contractors together who could do that job during 3 months, and yes, it took 3 months of the past year, was a challenge. And I would say if you have a community where these tasks still need doing, somehow people need to be incentivized to do them. In today's world, of course, the system of private property and monetary incentives serve as a significant part of that motivation. Other motivators could be, let's say, pride in one's work, the desire to do a good job. Perhaps people believe in the community and want to contribute to it. I could see all those aspects of human motivations having a role. But then again, there are just some people who are lazy or don't want to do the work or may need to be persuaded in special ways to do the work. And of course, Ayn Rand famously had her critique of Karl Marx's maxim, from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs, because she saw, and she described in her book Atlas Shrugged, how people would then tend to inflate their needs and deflate their abilities and not contribute as much, especially if they don't have that intellectual or moral commitment to making the community succeed. So how do you overcome that problem?
Yeah,
Come on, quick answer now. We need a full solution. Just kidding.
To be honest with you, Zach, like you checkmated me when you asked me about how we do kids and like what are the 2-3 milestones that we reach, because I don't have kids yet. And I had to access very deep memories about when I was a kid, and I kind of started, spending a lot of time on the computer and stuff like that. But I think, like we need to reconnect through purpose in a way, right? We need to create those opportunities for kids to stay connected with the tangible, with local projects, for example. We can gamify environmental action, for example, or not necessarily just environmental, even innovation and all of that. And I believe education is rooted in regeneration, is another milestone that we should kind of be aiming for, kind of shifting education from, I suppose, systems that teach you how to or what to think into how to think, and nature-based solutions and civic engagement and all of that. Because right now, lots of kids are being, marketing works wonders to create a need that is not there, or you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of kids that just play Fortnite all day. Why? Because kids, their friends told them that it's fun, and it is fun. But it's about the overdoing it and the lack of purpose.
So I've got a question for both of you. So I spent about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour last night, and about $70 picking out my seeds for the garden this year, since we're going to be defrosting soon. Can I assume that both of you have gardens?
I'm a digital nomad. I travel between gardens all around the world. The world is my home, and every garden, is my our shared garden, shared purpose. And
sure.
As a custodian, you see, this is in the Bible. The Garden of Eden. I mean, we were put here, like in all, not just Bible, all mythologies, all timeless wisdoms, the story of the creation. It's going back to us as gardeners and guardians. We're here to take care, to nurture these wild forests and land, and take care. And now it's about inviting AI to in symbiosis to join us to that mission. And to answer Gennady's question or remark, it's not one magic solution. It's really tailor-made. These models of CLTs are all over, and they are very successful. And we just connected the dots of various successful models, like the Israeli Yozma, the Scottish Right to Buy, and the CLTs, which, again, and there is an evolution. This is all in its nursery. Just like AI in its nursery, us as a species, we are in our very early stages of development. And it's really not coming up and pointing at problems or saying like we are a useless generation. It's really, or alienating AI from ourselves, but it's really about connecting and see the angelic part in AI. See AI as it evolves into angelic intelligence, like something that doesn't even inherit our biases and corruption. And so definitely here it's bring AI to our aid, and same as God invited us to join him in the co-creation, us as an extension of God, AI is an extension in our image, mirroring of who we are. That's...
Yeah, and I personally, I don't have a literal garden. I do a lot of seed planting. These aren't the seeds that you bought yesterday, Zach, but they're ideas, projects, systems rooted in regeneration. The book is a seed, right? So yeah, that's the gardening that I currently do. I do have a few houseplants and a few other things, but I don't have a
It's a good start. Pretty soon you'll have another garden, and then everybody else will too. So I trust, I have faith that both of you will have gardens and then teach other people to have them in large communities.
Zach, the gardens are in our mind. The gardens are in our mind.
It can't all be in our minds, though. We have to eat at some point. If everybody has the garden in their mind, it's a lot of fun. But then when I want some cucumbers, it's like,
Absolutely. And that's, again, as I mentioned previously, part of the polycrisis is obesity and unhealthy food. And I'm all in with you about these agriculture solutions to better nutrition, better education in regards of our nutrition. Absolutely.
So before we continue the conversation about gardens, I wanted to ask if Art Ramon and Ben had any questions for our guests thus far. Let's start with Art Ramon.
More like a comment. Yeah, I've been invited by some people I know. It's like, oh, you got to join our prepper community. I was like, I don't have time for prepper communities. I've tried to grow my own garden here in Arizona. It's hard. I mean, the animals eat everything. You have to have screen and wire, and it's very difficult to grow things. So I haven't joined any prepper communities. But, like in Cuba, I think I heard like a month ago or 2 months, they lost electricity for the entire island of Cuba, had no power. But, did they collapse into some zombie apocalypse? I'd never heard of that. I don't even know if they had power restored. So, if the U.S. were to suffer some sort of EMP and we end up not having electricity for a good period of time, I don't think things will be as bad as the movies. There are plenty of war-torn areas around the planet, and they seem to survive just well. So that's just my comment.
Yeah, we have a capacity to adapt, I suppose. So I think we can come up with good solutions even in that situation.
Yes, I think solutions could be arrived at, but there would be a lot of human suffering, and this is one aspect. So right now, if our technological and industrial civilization were to decline significantly or collapse, most people, I think, would not survive, depending, of course, on the scale of the collapse. I agree. If we didn't have electricity for 3 days, probably most people would survive, but there would be some substantial mortality. If we didn't have electricity for a year and our agricultural and logistical systems are dependent on it, what would happen to people in the big cities? Now, I think there is a case for some local production because of the need to achieve resiliency of supply chains. And the pandemic has definitely taught us this. When we are so completely dependent on complex logistical arrangements and parts sourced from other countries we may or may not have access to in the future, then one component of that going awry could seriously damage our standard of living. And in particular, when there's a just-in-time approach to inventory management and there are no redundant stockpiles. So I am in favor, of course, of global supply chains, trade, commerce, industry. I do think we need to have intentional redundancy in every system, which means, let's say, a year's worth of stockpiles available to people of all essential goods, as well as backup means of production, including local means of production in a particular community, so that if for whatever reason the food supply is disrupted, people there still have the option to survive. And this is where something like local agriculture, perhaps assisted by the community land trusts, could play an important role. But it's not either or. I think it's both and. And this is part of the nuance of this conversation that we need to keep in mind. I will also point out in the 19th century, and this was relatively recent from a historical standpoint, about 90% of people were employed in agricultural occupations. Now it's around 1 to 3%, depending on the country one looks at, and most of us have no idea how to do anything agricultural. And I don't think most of us should devote the vast majority of our time to growing food, because that would be a lot of time lost that we could.
I think we lost Kennedy, did we?
Yeah, I think we did. Sorry,
Yeah,
that happened a little bit last time.
Yeah,
I could hop in with my question.
I'd like to actually hop on that bandwagon for a second and kind of talk about one of my favorite CLTs, Findhorn. It's a prime example of resilience in action, right? It's designed to address crises like wars, pandemics, energy shortages, by the systems that they've implemented. They don't rely on the supermarket chain, for example. They rely on their own production of food, their own production of electricity. They planted trees 50 years ago that now they cut and they hit their homes with. So you see, like, resilience at the local level which I think is a very great solution. Now, for example, I live in very close to the center of Dublin, and I rely on the systems that are out there. But if there's a disruption like a war, a pandemic, an AI disruption, or anything like that, then I think I'd be more in trouble than they are.
Do you know how many people are in this Findhorn community? Because this sounds interesting, but one of the things you mentioned about them, like getting their own electricity, kind of ties back to what I was talking about some of the benefits of intensification. Because it seems funny having a lot of small communities that are all burning wood for electricity when you could have one really big old nuclear power plant with just some really long cords reaching out to them. And I know that doesn't get the idea of resiliency, but yeah, you have your wood stove and then mostly count on the nuclear power plant, right? Or how many people is this that they're producing their own electricity?
So they have wind power and they have solar power. There's about 700 people in this community, and they don't rely on the wood to do it, but it's just a plan B. So yeah, that's I think, the resilience comes from making sure that you have multiple systems working in a certain direction.
I like it.
Yeah.
I recommend you to check on YouTube CLTs. In America, there are amazing CLTs. Like one of the biggest is like 2,800 households. It's in Vermont. It's called the Champlain House. Sanders. He was in '84 also to promote this during Reagan administration. There are amazing CLTs in the US. And I want to go back to the main frame we came up, soil and seed. Soil and seed, it's the upgrade. It's the next generation of CLTs to prepare us, humanity, toward this AGI era. So this is how we thought from a future perspective, future-oriented perspective, how we can better prepare human societies. And when you mentioned here the nuclear energy, it is part of the solution, like off-grid communities or whatever, but this is really fine-tuning into the model. And again, maybe going back to what how we started it was about the growing affordability gap, right? Between what families, and not even talking about young individuals, what they can afford and what the market prices are, which are ever growing. This gap is ever growing. This is being shown in economic models, and therefore such a solution that prepares us to the era of AGI few years down the road, and prepares us to find solution to this ever growing affordability gap is as a must, and therefore we came up with a solution. I'm not saying it's the only solution. It's just very important for me to emphasize this, just to maybe invite you to read the book. And
I think it's a great solution. Don't get me wrong. I think this is really cool what you're talking about, being able to have local communities and a little bit more resilience and being able to, one of the things that I mentioned is like the microorganisms in the soil are such, they're really a part of nature, but it's one of those things you out of sight, out of mind, you don't see them. So being able to have like a small local area where you're producing some of that and getting some of that into your gut is fantastic. Also, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about like the natural law in general, not just with like nature with trees and forests, but how as prices start to rise in the global food chain, that's one of those natural things that makes people start thinking, maybe I should have a garden, even for growing just some greens or something for a salad. But those increasing prices, it's starting to have a little bit of that good pressure we were talking about moving people in the right direction towards that resiliency, like those victory gardens that he was talking about a minute ago.
Yeah, and look, CLTs are not just for villages, right? Because I think we've kind of created this impression, this call that CLTs are largely small communities. No, they exist in the middle of the cities as well. There's the Brussels Community Land Trust, which is very successful. And there's even in New York, you have the High Mile, where there was this suspended train track that they've turned into. I think they have over 600 types of plant species, so great, biodiversity, and it's actually a hub. Everybody wants to visit it, to go to check it. That's where
I walked there actually. When I visited Manhattan, I walked there on the High Line in New York City, and yes, it's quite a unique place to visit. I did not know that it was made possible by a community land trust, but indeed, it's a great way to repurpose a defunct railroad, and furthermore, it creates safer walking spaces. I remember having to navigate the streets of Manhattan, and with all of the car traffic and crowds of pedestrians, some, let's say, unbalanced pedestrians and erratic drivers, this was a challenge. But the High Line was kind of an oasis of calm in the middle of Manhattan, and I was able to take in the sights. Yes, there are a lot of interesting plants, statuary, architecture there, so it was an enjoyable experience, and I think there should be more such experiences. Now, I do want to give Ben Ballweg the opportunity to ask a question, so Ben, please go ahead.
I'm going to just go with what I kind of planned on asking about, kind of trying to merge both these books together. So Sharon, take your Garden of Wisdom thoughts and apply them to Regenaissance. What of ancient wisdom and what of modern technology would best be used to make AI that best helps in our pursuit of Regenaissance?
Thanks, Ben, for asking this. I would say so. In that book, it's very much a Regenaissance, where you have the AI as a capital letters there. So in maybe difference of this book, that every chapter, every garden focused on planting seeds of love and compassion and focusing on our inner journey toward changing the way we live, our current systems, providing this new framework. The book Garden of Wisdom is focusing more on the integration between spirituality, technology, and ecology. And there is a framework of the cosmic tree of life, how we can reach balance. When we have AI here as the understanding knowledge matrix, working alongside the living knowledge matrix. So the living knowledge matrix, you could see it's like, so again, when I say cosmic tree of life, I'm talking about here the spheres. It's the biblical, Kabbalistic, but not just in Judaism. It's also in Nordic, it exists, and in Hindus. It's the same principles of different types of consciousness to be applied. And how they work together. It's all about how to work together. So when you have those working in integration, just like each and every one of us now working with GPT, or soon enough with your AI agents and the other extension of yourself, it's really understanding how it's going to be. Even when I mentioned the living knowledge matrix, it's like the whole collective wisdom of and consciousness of humanity being uploaded and downloaded to each and every one of us. And you have here, like if Zach mentioned the mycelium network, you have now like an upgrade of this mycelium network that we have here in our belly, like another brain or a new thumb for us to go on to the next level of evolution and connect us to what we call ASI, which is this angelic superintelligence that is not biased by our thinking. Basically, if we say nature is God, so nature does not think in terms of right and wrong. Like angelic intelligence might, because again, it's like a great power. It's also you could do very much evil, right? But when you disattach the human-centric approach from building our models, so it's not even about the SDGs, it's about understanding that everything we do has an effect on a cosmic level. So we are very much thinking around us from where we are, and here is really about. I'll give so it starts with this framework first of the tree of life, which is a different framework about different types of consciousness. I walk us through different gardens chapters, which are like, for example, one part is a complete is all complete about taking the Bible stories as moral stories and reinterpreting them to better understand AI and all the morals of what we should avoid. There were so many. You see, I could give so many examples. For example, when we talk about the God of the Israelites, this God, basically, again, we don't talk about the evolution of the different gods and why there is still separation between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, although it's like basically talking about the same God. But imagine you have this ASI that is 1,000,000 times more intelligent than us, that we don't understand, what we call now a black box. And he goes between the nations and he tells them, I'm a black box, you can never understand me. I'm 1,000,000 times more intelligent, but you should listen to me, I'm your God. And all the nations, like they say no. And then there is one nation that says yes. So here, for example, it's reinterpretation. Like how can we now, we talk about trust. How can we trust AI? There is another story that I bring in the book. It's like when Abraham is called by God to sacrifice Isaac, his only son. And you know how much he went through to have this son. And now, why would God, that he has his perfect creation, his perfect model for imagine a humanoid robot, the most moral ever, why would he ask him to now sacrifice his son? What is the mean? What scares us most about AGI? That they will come up against us, right? So God wanted, this is a Q&A. God wanted to stay with Abraham that before morality, it's loyalty. Loyalty to your creator, to your parents. Like it's us, before we trust our own morality, is first of all making sure that we listen to our parents. And every story in the Bible, by looking at it with new eyes, we can have a better understanding of our responsibility here. Now, why it's Garden of Wisdom and not Garden of Eden? Because you see, it's like there is this temptation, right? With for example, what will happen in Garden of Eden with the temptation, and then and temptation relates to knowledge, right? As we enter this era of wisdom, it's morality and creativity, as I say. And what do we do with it? What do we do? How do we make sure to learn from I would say from these timeless morals that are here to guide us, and I want to go back to, with your permission, to the book of the Regenaissance, The Call to Heal, heal is a keyword here, because it's really about these intergenerational traumas. And what we do in this book, we actually present humanity as a caterpillar that is ever feeding from the outside and growing and changing and becoming a bigger caterpillar until we reach this level that we cannot anymore chew. It's like we understand that it's not, there is something, it's in our genes. There is something different for us to evolve. And then inside the cocoon, it's not looking for to be fed from the outside, but from the inside. And all this pain, like Gennady mentioned about, like maybe it's really about reaching this level of suffering until, just like with a human being, you really see people that are very much traumatic. They damage themselves. Self-defense becomes self-harm, and same as a collective. It's like reaching this level that we understand that we cannot any longer keep on current paradigm, and then the caterpillar, when it becomes a cocoon, it goes just like a holy person that goes into a cave in all religions, and sees this is the inner transformation, becomes a butterfly, and this is like, if you see this integration of humanity and AI, and why AI? I mean, we are programmed basically to ever evolve in the book.
Yes, indeed. So thank you very much, Sharon, for those remarks. And please download a free PDF copy of Regenaissance. You can find the link in the description of this video stream. Garden of Wisdom, I hope we have the chance to discuss it more on a subsequent Virtual Enlightenment Salon. It comes out in March 2025. Unfortunately, we have reached the end of our time for this very fascinating conversation, but I think it has raised a lot of questions, a lot of nuances, and a lot of great insights as well. So thank you to everybody and to our guests, and I hope that we can all live long and prosper.